Welcome and thank you all for coming out. Am I too loud? How am I doing here? Okay, great. Hey, thanks everybody. I mean, this is August and we've got an almost full room here. I couldn't be happier. Thanks for coming out to the Beer and SEO Meetup. Thank you, Jairus. Well, first of all, I want to always make sure that we thank our sponsors, especially considering one of their team is in the room here. So thank you so much to Go Fish Digital. You guys make this all possible. We also want to thank Adapt Partners. I think there's a few of them in the room here too. Okay, good. Thank you. And we also have a sponsor, Ecom Integrate. That's Keith over there. He's working hard for us and we love him for it. Okay, so tonight we're going to hear from somebody from Go Fish Digital, and Chris Long, he has been doing this for years, I assume. I mean, we vet them here. So tonight he's going to talk about Googlebot, and we've all heard about it. We kind of read blogs about it, but he's going to explain it all, and we'll be able to ask questions of him. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to him. Now, what he's going to do is he's going to speak to us, and we're going to take a 5-minute break so people can get some more beer, because that's what we're all about here. And then we'll go into a question and answer thing. Okay? How does that sound, everybody? Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Do they hear you?
Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Perfect. So, firstly, big thank you to Rob, JR, Patrick, Jennifer, Grayson, everyone involved in the Beer and SEO Meetup. You guys do a really, really good job attracting high-quality speakers to the Meetup every single month. So really, really appreciate it, you guys. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, so appreciate it. As well, thank you to my lovely team at Go Fish Digital. You guys are the absolute best. I thought there'd be like one of you coming out tonight. So thank you guys so much for coming out. That means a lot to me. So what I'm going to talk about today is how Googlebot sees your site differently than users do. And I think as SEOs, we get caught up in all of these different things, right? We're constantly trying to improve content quality and improve website performance or build more links to our site. But one thing we don't think about as much is that Googlebot, it's going to have a different perception of our website than we do, and we might not even realize it. And kind of this concept of perception is what I want to talk about today. How can two different things or two different people perceive the exact same thing differently? So for example, when I look at this sandwich, this is what I see, right? There is no greater culinary masterpiece to me than the double quarter pounder with cheese, no onions. But while, I might see culinary achievement when I look at this picture, my girlfriend, on the other hand, she sees big pile of trash. No matter how much I try to get her into fast food, she just won't do it. This is probably closer to what it actually looks like when it comes out anyways. But right, clear difference in perception about the exact same thing. Another example, maybe a little more pertinent to our industry, might be AMP, right? Accelerated mobile pages. Some SEOs might view this as a new and innovative technology that's going to transform the way we think about website performance. On the other hand, other SEOs might not feel that same way. Won't name any names here. I've crossed Patrick's name out so he can remain anonymous. Once again, clear difference in perception about the exact same thing. I think kind of the marketing campaign that highlights this the best is this campaign run by the Transport of London. And they ran this campaign to raise awareness for cyclists in London, and I thought they did it in a really, really interesting way. Essentially, this is going to show you the exact same event twice. The only difference between the first time you see the event and the second time you see the event is you'll receive a piece of information, and that piece of information will allow you to perceive the event in an entirely different manner.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make? The answer is 30. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
I literally can't watch that and not see the bear anymore. But I think this campaign does a really good job, right? Because it's easy to miss the bear when you first see it, right? Your focus is on the people making passes, you're actually counting, and you're missing a completely obvious event that's happening right in front of you. And I think I really like the text at the end of this as well. It's easy to miss the things that you're not looking for. I think that's just generally true in life, but also true in SEO, right? Like when I'm analyzing a site, these are generally the parameters I'm using. I'm using a Chrome browser and using a desktop device. Now the reason being is this is probably the most efficient way for me to analyze websites, have all my extensions set up, I know how to use Chrome DevTools decently well. It's just an efficient way for me to look at a website. But we know that Google, these aren't the parameters that it uses to crawl a website, right? The way that Google crawls a site is going to be different than the way users are going to interact with your site, and we might be missing those things. So what I want to talk to you about today is how to identify those parameters that Google is using, and in essence, identify the moonwalking bears of SEO, the things that might be easy to miss when you're not looking for them. So I'm just going to keep this, pretty practical. I like to use actual client examples in my presentations. So I'll kind of show you different examples of actual client examples of how we've seen Googlebot have different perceptions of our client websites. So heading tags is a fairly straightforward example. This is an actual client blog post. And all I did is, from the user perspective, I just highlighted what I thought each heading tag would be. I thought that text at the top, it's pretty small. I said that's probably paragraph text. You would probably make the argument for H5 or H6. The next text, direct sales, I said that's the biggest text currently in the viewport. We probably want users to pay attention to that. That's probably our H2 tags. It's not the title, but it's probably an H2. The last text, I said that's probably a child of that H2 tag. That's probably an H3. So that made a lot of sense to me as a user, but what we were about to encounter is our first moonwalking bear. When I actually inspected the source code, this is actually what the heading tags were labeled as. The smallest text on the page was actually labeled as the largest to Google. That biggest text on the page is actually a child of that element and is actually labeled as an H3 tag. And finally, then that text at the end is labeled as an H4. But this causes clear differences between the signals we think we might be sending and the signal Googlebot's receiving. For example, we might say that, hey, direct sales, that's the most important text on the page. We want to ensure that we're keeping that in our primary heading tags. We want to tell Google that our content hierarchy is based around this term. But when Googlebot reads the site, it's saying, no, jobs for stay-at-home moms is the most important text on the page, even though to users, that might not be inherently obvious. So we might be sending Google different signals than what we're intending. So this might not be a huge deal, but it could be a bigger deal if you think about this is going to happen on every single blog post, and that might add up to hundreds or thousands of blogs over time, where we're sending Googlebot slightly different signals than what we think we are. Robots.txt. This is another really, really interesting way that I think causes differences between user and Google views. For instance, when a user goes to the site, they just navigate directly there. So I go to this site, this is what I might see. Pretty standard, albeit slightly outdated site. See a logo, a row of images, social sharing icons, a blog roll, fairly standard. But we know from the log file analysis that we do that Googlebot, it has to crawl the robots.txt first, right? That's where it says, that's what tells it, hey, here's what you can crawl on the site and here's what you can't crawl. So what happens if we had a command like this in our robots.txt? It says disallow WP content. That's generally the directory where our rich assets are. our images, our JavaScript, our CSS, the things that kind of bring the site to life. As a user, I don't have to navigate to the robots.txt first and say, ooh, like, what can I look at and what can I look at on the website? But Googlebot does. And if you block it from crawling these resources, the next moonwalking bear is this might be the version of the page that it sees. A completely bare bones version with just basically some text and some internal links and some like weird bullet points in there. Not a high quality user experience. If Google can't get a complete paint of the page, that's going to lead to suboptimal rankings as a result. You can actually check for this using Google's mobile-friendly testing tool. Of course, you can audit the robots.txt directly. I think this is a bit of an easier way to do it. You basically plug your URL in here, and then Googlebot or Google will give you this report saying, hey, here's all the resources that I wasn't able to load, and here's a status as to why. And one of those statuses is blocked by robots.txt. If you're seeing external scripts like this, it's generally not as high of a priority. There's generally nothing you can do about it. But if you're seeing a lot of your internal resources get blocked, such as your WP content folder, and also you're seeing kind of a partial rendering of what you were in the previous screen, that indicates that you're blocking Googlebot from crawling key resources on the site, and a suboptimal crawl will lead to suboptimal rankings as a result. So pop-ups. This is probably my favorite example in the entire presentation. I thought this was a really, really cool way that our team was able to identify differences between the way Googlebot viewed the site and the way users viewed it. So backstory here is when this client came to us, they said, hey, we're seeing some pretty significant drops in terms of organic traffic. We noticed two things. One, the client had gone through a big website migration, always kind of a bad sign. And two, most of the traffic was mobile traffic. That's where we were seeing the biggest drops was in mobile. So we took a deeper look into kind of the mobile user experience, and here's what it looked like from a user view. You'd navigate to the site, and immediately you'd be presented with a pop-up. That pop-up would say, hey, the site wants to use your device's location. You can either allow or you can block it. Generally, users are very accustomed to seeing pop-ups and trying just to get away from them really quickly. So you generally click allow, and you'd immediately be taken to the website's homepage where you'd see a complete rendering of the content. Generally, the process happened pretty fast. Probably took about a second for a user to navigate here. Not the best user experience, but something we didn't think was killing the rankings of the site. But what we found was we then took this page and then we did another test. We ran it through Googlebot's or Google's Fetch and Render tool. And what we found was the third moonwalking bear. Instead of seeing all of this rich content, the banner image, the call to action, the featured collections, Google was able to see absolutely nothing. Not a single piece of content was rendered in the DOM. Google wasn't finding any of the site's content whatsoever. We double and triple check this. Fun fact, if you run it through Google's URL tool, I believe, or Fetch and Render tool, I believe 3 different times, this is what you'll see. It'll actually show you the moonwalking bears as a result. Thought that was weird. But we went back. We took a look at the user view. You're not going to find higher quality slides than this at any search conference you go to. I promise you that. So we then took a look. We then took a look to see, what was Google seeing? Why is it returning no content? And the thing that's easy to miss is, as a user, you see the pop-up, right? You see that, hey, we want to allow or block the device. Is that cool or not? But Google, if you take a look behind the pop-up, that initial page is completely blank. And Google can't click, I want to allow or I want to block the website content. Google's going there saying, oh, I guess there's nothing here, and then leaving because it has better things to do. The reason this website's rankings were tanking was because Google wasn't able to render any of the website's content whatsoever. So the solution was pretty straightforward. We said, hey, you can still keep the pop-up, but instead of loading a blank screen for both users and Google, make sure that when you load the pop-up, actual content renders instead. That will allow both Google and users to get a complete version of the page, and that should hopefully restore organic traffic and rankings as a result. It ended up working pretty well. We saw a significant increase in organic traffic after implementation, especially on mobile devices. I believe organic traffic improved by 180 to 200%, I want to say. The fact that Googlebot was actually able to read our content was probably a big reason why that was. Mobile-first indexing. Mobile-first indexing also causes really interesting differences between Google and user views that we might not be aware of. Remember that first example I showed you where I said I primarily use kind of a desktop view? I think a lot of us get in that habit because it's an efficient way of analyzing a website. But the thing is, we know that Google, if you have a mobile version available, that's what it's going to look at because the majority of website traffic is mobile. So Google's going to assess your website based on your mobile content, your mobile structured data, your mobile internal linking structure, and that can be something that's easy to forget. So this is another client example. Basically, this client also came to us and said, hey, we're seeing pretty significant decreases in terms of organic traffic. Can you help us out and see what's going on? So we took a look, and we always like to try to match up big drops with serious events that have happened, right? What are algorithm updates that have happened right before the drop? What are big website changes that you've made right before the drop? What are new things that have just happened in the search engines right before the drop? So one thing we noticed was that this client, we noticed that this was right around the time that Google Search Console was sending us all of those mobile-first emails. Hey, we're switching over to mobile-first. We switched over to mobile-first on September 4th. This was around that September 2018 time period where Google was doing a lot of those mobile-first indexing switches. So we got curious and we audited the site, both the desktop and mobile site, to try to find key differences in the content. And here's what we saw on desktop. And we really like the secondary navigation. I know some people aren't a fan of these kind of like mega menu type of navigations. I personally am. And what we found was that we thought this secondary navigation, you would basically hover over one of those primary navigation options and see it. We thought this did a lot of good things for the site. One, it made these pages a lot more crawlable because there was an internal link to them on every single page of the site. Two, it distributed more link equity to them. Because once again, there was an internal link to them on every single page of the site. Finally, you could make the argument that it improved user experience. The reason I like it is because I think it kind of flattens the view out for the user. Instead of only being able to see a handful of products at once or a handful of options in the primary navigation option, users are allowed to see a lot of different products. It's kind of a quick list of links. So we really liked it on desktop for that reason. But the moonwalking bear here is that on mobile, didn't exist. Only those primary navigation options were there, no secondary navigation option to be found on mobile devices. This made these pages less crawlable, it distributed less link equity to them, and you could make the argument that it hurt user experience. So once again, the solution was pretty straightforward. We basically just told the client, hey, take your desktop navigation and just mirror that on mobile. Make sure the exact same linking structure you're using that on desktop, apply that to mobile devices. They were able to implement that, and here you can see the secondary navigation options. You will click on tabletop boxes, you see the secondary navigation options. You click on floor boxes, you see the secondary navigation options, so on and so forth. And so we had an exact replica of the mobile and desktop navigations. Once again, this ended up working pretty well. We ended up seeing a large traffic rebound right after implementation. Organic traffic actually improved past baseline levels, and rankings kind of leveled out as a result. And we think that made those pages much more crawlable and distributed more link equity to them. So when I analyze most sites, generally one of the things I try to do is analyze the mobile site and pull that up side by side with the desktop site and just notice any differences in content. Sometimes you'll see on desktop, there'll be content that'll just completely disappear on mobile for like no apparent reason. Oftentimes, you'll see differences in internal linking architecture. Similar to the previous example, you'll see a navigation that exists on desktop, but just does not exist on mobile whatsoever. Sometimes you also see that with footers as well. The footer will exist on desktop, but then you'll switch to mobile, and that footer will just completely disappear. That's actually going to impact the way Google crawls through the site, because it's going to have to use a different internal linking structure. Another thing I like to look for is just content that might be in expandable sections on mobile, but is not initially visible on desktop. There's some SEOs that think this might devalue the content if it's in an expandable section on mobile. I personally don't think that's the case, but I do like to note just any differences between the mobile and desktop experiences. I think that can just be powerful to know in terms of how Google's crawling the site, and to be aware that Google's perception is that this content will be in an expandable section. Redirects. Redirects are also another interesting way that cause differences between Google and user views. Here is a basic recording of a redirect on a user view. I'm sure we've all seen it thousands of times. I go to the incorrect URL on Go Fish Digital here, and quickly redirected back to the site's page. You'll notice a few things. One, it happens pretty quickly, right? It takes about half a second to a second to load. And two, like, as a user, I don't care what status code is used. It doesn't matter whether that was a 301 or a 307 or a 302 redirect. Like I don't give a shit as a user. But to Google, the moonwalking bear here is we know that it does matter. And here's why. So this is a client that once again came to us with significant drops in terms of organic traffic and rankings. And one thing we noticed is that right before the organic traffic drop, they had gone through a huge website migration where they redirected hundreds of URLs to new URL paths. We then audited the migration, and what we found was that the mappings looked pretty good, but what they were doing is they were using 302 redirects instead of 301. 302 redirects are temporary, so they're suggesting a temporary change. 301 redirects are permanent. So we went to the client and said, hey, everything looks really good here. The mappings look okay. But our only suggestion is change that status code. We think by pushing 302 redirects, you're sending less link equity to the final destination URL. So in February of 2018, they actually changed the status code 302 to 301. We believe that distributed more link equity to those destination URLs. And I believe in about 2 months' time, an additional 36 keywords were ranking on the first page as a result. And organic traffic rebounded back to normal levels. So what this shows us is that status codes to Google, they matter. And for me personally, unless you have a really, really good reason to be using a 302 redirect, like so good you can say, this is the reason I'm using the 302, I recommend using a 301 instead. There's almost no reason not to. As long as that redirect is permanent, you're at minimum giving Google just more accurate information about the status of the redirect. And two, you could potentially be diluting link equity with a 302. Changing it to 301 will help ensure that you're getting the most link equity from your redirect. And to me, it doesn't matter whether a 302 redirect dilutes link equity by 15% or 1%. If there's a chance you can get more link equity as a result, I would recommend using 302 instead. So the way you audit for this is you can use your backlink analysis tool of choice. I'm just using Ahrefs here, but you can use Moz, Link Explorer, or other backlink analysis tools. You can just filter down by 302 redirects. And this is showing you the URLs in your site that have the most backlinks that are returning 302 redirects. Personally, I wouldn't need to see any backlinks for a URL to suggest changing 302 to 301. But if you're trying to develop a list of some of your high priority URLs to change over, maybe you just want to get a list of your top 50 URLs to change, this can be a good way to go, especially if you're just trying to get some buy-in from another party. All right, infinite scrolling. Now we're getting a little bit more into the technical component of the presentation, but I think this also causes really, really interesting differences between Google and user views. So what an infinite scroll is it's this very Facebook style of scrolling on your website. You'll see I start the infinite scroll here. Let's say only an initial 20 products render on the page. You'll see this site loads more products as I scroll down. So the user continues to scroll, more products load. They scroll down a little bit more products load, so on and so forth until you get to the very bottom of the infinite scroll. Now the reason this is getting more common is because this helps page load time. Instead of having to load 100 different images and 100 different products at once, this helps give the user kind of a faster user experience. Basically, you're saying, we're only going to give the user what they need, so we're going to give them 20 products to start, and if they're interested, we'll continue to serve them more products as they scroll further down the site. So it does make sense from kind of a performance standpoint. But the question is we know that Google, it can't perform that infinite scroll, right? Google's not like scrolling down your page, looking at your different products and being like, ooh, like I wonder which one I'm gonna buy. Googlebot's just going to the page, seeing the first 20, and then leaving. So what we did is we performed some tests. Let's say this page loaded 20 products to start. We first tested to see, okay, is Google indexing the first 20 products? And what we found was generally it was. We could typically find the first 20 products in Google's index. The next thing we tested was products 21 plus. And the moonwalking bear was that we consistently could not find products 21 plus in Google's index. Google wasn't able to reach that content. If Google wasn't able to index it, it means it's not crawling it. And this can be bad for SEO because there are several reasons. One is Google might think your content's a little bit lower quality. It might go and say, hey, you have 20 products, and that's great, but your competitors, they have 50, they have 100 different products. Those are higher quality results. We're gonna rank them above you. The other thing this might hurt with is the internal links to your individual product pages. Google might say, hey, you have 5 internal links to these product pages. I mean, that's okay, but you don't really seem to think it's that high of a priority. So for that reason, we're not gonna rank it as high. But you might be saying, no, we have 100 internal links to those product pages. You just can't see them because you can't read past the infinite scroll and you can't see the products deeper in the website architecture. So the solution to this is if you just Google infinite scroll SEO, there's a phenomenal tutorial set up by John Mueller where he tells you how to make this implementation search friendly. Essentially what you don't want to do is that image on the left right there. You don't want to associate all of your individual products with just one URL. Google is not going to be able to read through the infinite scroll. Instead, what you want to do is you want to break up for each infinite scroll that occurs, you want to break those up into different component pages right there. So that means each component page will have its own unique internal link that Google will be able to grab onto and actually read the content associated with that product listing page. So for example, products, I believe 1 through 6 are associated with the URLs fun items. Products 7 through 12 are associated with the URL fun items page 2. And then products 13 through 18 are associated with the URL fun items page 3. So on and so forth until you get to the bottom of the infinite scroll. Assigning that unique URL will kind of allow Google to be able to actually crawl your website's content. Here's an actual example of that implementation. You can see that as I'm scrolling down, that URL is going to change, right? As I continue to scroll, right now I'm on page 5. The user continues to scroll, that changes to page 6. Once again, so on and so forth until you reach the bottom of the infinite scroll. It's going to allow Google to read all of the content deeper in your website's architecture. As well, as part of that demo, there's also a great demo link set up by John Mueller, I believe. I'm a visual person by nature, so I thought this was really beneficial. Essentially, what this is going to show you is a visual example of how to set up this implementation, not just the standard article. This will show you all the little technical details, how to set up your canonical tags, or what happens if you navigate directly to a component page, or how to set up your previous and next tags if you're still into that type of thing. It'll show you all those little technical details that you need. I also found it really useful because I just sent this link to a developer and was like, hey, we're trying to go for this. Can we emulate this as closely as possible? All right, last one is geotargeting / dynamic content. This is also another really, really interesting way that causes differences between user and Google views. What geotargeting is basically a website's going to recognize where my device's location is, and it's just going to serve me content based on that. So I go to this website, and it says, hey, Chris, I know you're browsing from Raleigh, North Carolina. We're just going to serve you the North Carolina content. You'll notice how in that search bar, that set to North Carolina might be a little hard to see. And I also want you to notice how in that first row of products, there's a barbecue franchise there. Should be pretty easy to remember, North Carolina barbecue franchise, probably not surprising. And the reason websites do this is for user experience improvements, right? The website's trying to save me from landing on the page and then having to click on the state dropdown and then navigate through the state dropdown, accidentally click on North Dakota instead of North Carolina, then click search, then wait for the website to load and then get my results. The website's essentially just serving you those results a lot faster, kind of trying to improve their conversion rates and also improve your user experience. But the question then becomes is where is Google, where is it going to get geo-targeted to? Google's obviously crawling from a specific location. What state is Google going to get? So you would generally think California, and that's what we've seen in the past. It makes sense because Google is located in Mountain View, California. They have servers there. That's where a lot of their crawlers are from. The moonwalking bear here is that Google was actually caching this content from a Michigan location, which I don't really have an explanation for, but I thought that was really, really interesting. And once again, this could be bad for SEO because what happens if what happens if they only offer one product in Michigan? Google is landing on the page and saying, hey, you have one product here. That's not a high quality result. Once again, your competitors, they have 50, they have 100, they have 200 different products. We're going to rank them above you. So we're still working on this implementation for the client. I'm sure there's a bunch of different ways you could do it. We're trying to set up an all locations page right now. And the goal will be is when Googlebot crawls the site, it will just get triggered that all locations page. That way, regardless of where Google crawls from, it's going to get served all of our products, so Google will have a more complete crawl of the website. So that's all I have in terms of kind of tactical initiatives. I really debated whether to include this next slide in the presentation, but I already filmed it on Saturday, so it's going in there. One of my hobbies, lesser known, is I'm okay at dancing. So I thought it was kind of a natural fit, right? I'm talking about this moonwalking bear, and I'm okay at dance. So I figured, why not try to emulate the moonwalking bear for myself? And here is my attempt. That title of the slide is so accurate. Anyways, that's all I have for you guys. I really hope you guys walk away from here with some really good takeaways in terms of Googlebot's different perception of your website and how user views and Google views might differ. And kind of what I hope you guys walk away from is being able to identify those moonwalking bears and make those things that might be easy to miss just a little bit more obvious. So appreciate you guys letting me speak, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, everybody. And we're going to go ahead and allow people to grab a beer, and then we'll have you back here for question and answer. You okay with that?
Yep, works for me.
Sounds great. Okay, thanks, everybody. Okay, everybody. Is everybody hearing me okay? I can't tell. Everybody hearing over the speakers? Okay, fantastic. So now we're going to go into the Q&A part of this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand the microphone because we are recording tonight. I think we're even live. And we want to make sure we capture everything. So does anybody want to ask a question of Chris?
Who will it be?
Now I put you on the spot. Here we go. Oh, hold on, Greg.
Uh-oh.
Yes, I have a question. Hey, you just mentioned the Michigan example there with the geo-targeting. Is there a similar solution to that as there was to the lazy loading, like where you can make Google see all of those locations instead of just Michigan and stuff like that?
Yeah, so that's what we're kind of working on. I don't know the exact solution. I think like what we'd be how I would explain it, and I probably need assistance from a developer would be, hey, like when we want to get some sort of recognition when Googlebot's crawling the site, we want to, one, create an all locations page, and two, do some form of detection that when we notice that Googlebot's crawling the site, maybe it's a certain IP, or maybe it's just identifying the user agent as just either Googlebot smartphone, then when we notice that, then we serve the all locations page regardless. And that will ensure that like Google's not indexing our North Dakota content when there's like one franchise or something like that. That's kind of the ideal. I'm sure there's other ways you could do it. You might be able to do it using Ahreflang. I'm just not sure, and I just haven't been able to think about how you would implement it that way, but that's the immediate solution to me. Yeah.
Okay, any others? Everybody knows everything about Googlebot. Is that what you're telling me? Okay. Well, we really appreciate it, Chris. Thank you very much. We enjoyed the presentation.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so next month we have Mark Traphagen. He'll be coming in. I don't know what the topic is, but a lot of you know him. And beyond that, we just really want to say thank you very much for coming out tonight, and we'll see you guys next month, okay?